Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 246 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we need to finish hooking up our new ores and build the logic to control them. Enjoy. Well, now we have all of these setups here. We kind of want to do it in the same way everything else is done, if there was some kind of common process. And it kind of seems like there was, where the mixtures come first, specifically the ferrous comes first, and then later on, the basic processing happens. And as far as the order, well, it almost seems kind of random, to be honest. It doesn't seem like it's in any particular order. And both of these setups are done differently, so the order might be just whatever kind of makes sense, but I'm kind of looking at this now, and I'm not sure any of it ever made sense, so shrug. Let's see, we do have this coming through here. It doesn't look like it's really going to block anything, but we probably want to make it a little better. Not to mention, it would look cleaner if they were undergrounds like they're supposed to be. And we basically need to do that with all of these. Thank goodness for fast belt replacements to make this a lot more painless than it would have been otherwise. And I think that last belt that's going up is the output of the ore crystallizers. So that's going to be like a mixed belt of completely random ores. We did ferrous first before, so we'll do that first again. Ferrous dust sorting. And it's actually important to note that I think that some of these mixtures ran faster than others. Oops, and these ones actually need to be the cupric because it's only one belt of input. That some of these ran faster than others, so that's kind of why all of these setups aren't exactly the same size. Like this powder here is much smaller, and if we check on the sorting speeds, you can see that we process 4 per second for the mixture, and we process 6 per second for the powder, and then we process about 6 per second for the dust. But it's actually slightly less than that, so the exact size of the setups is kind of different every time, and that's a little annoying when it comes to planning this stuff. So let's double check our work that this should be approximately 1 belt of input, or I should say approximately 1 belt of output. It's not 1 belt of input because of productivity modules. And that's actually something also worth mentioning, that we're leaving some performance on the table with some of these setups here. For example, these mixtures only go to this sorting method, and we're producing 30 per second, but we're only consuming 18. The reason being that with productivity modules, we get 30 per second on our output, so that's the most we can put on this setup. However, in the future, when we get faster belts, we can actually expand some of these setups. Like this could be expanded down to use 45, because we have 30 units of input, but we're only using 18. So there's performance left on the table. It's less relevant for other sorting types. For example, let's go with zinc here, where we have all of these, and it's 18 and 18, but it's still not using the full amount. Like it's producing 63 a second, but we're not using 63 per second of input. But it's more relevant here because there's more than one place for this ore to go. So it actually makes a lot of sense that each one of these setups uses less than a full belt, because then it means that ore can go elsewhere to like make aluminum. Or truthfully, it would be aluminum sucks it all up and then some of it is left over for zinc. Without rebuilding this, we can't really do much, and I don't want certain setups to be bigger than others, so I'd rather just wait for faster belts, and then we can come in here and make these faster. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind, that when it comes to sorting the mixtures, that the speed of the machines is not only different from the non-mixtures setups, but it's also different between each of the types of mixtures. So we need to figure out how many of these machines we want, and it might be easier just to come in here and kind of create a line where we want to sort through this dust here. It's a little harder to figure out the output because it's a bunch of random numbers. And we need to add the productivity modules in there, which will fix everything. And yeah, a little bit more than 30. I don't know if there's a way of Hellmod just telling you the raw number of resources that come out, not having it separated by each item. That seems like a weird request to have, but we have our thing here. Let's see if 11 machines would actually be fine. So let's try like 17.5. It is, but it might be pushing it too close. So let's just do 12 machines. Guess I'll just leave power poles in place. Is that how it was done elsewhere? No, not really, but I'll just leave the power poles there. So let's see what this sorting looks like. We should be getting some cobalt, which is new, and some gold, which is new. Oh, they look so slow. Well, that's what productivity modules do. But I'm seeing some gold in there, and I'm seeing some cobalt. Which is good. We've been really waiting on that cobalt for quite some time with our need of blue belts. But it's also kind of funny how when you first start it, the colors are kind of grouped up rather well. Until they get mixed up as it starts to run. Although, I probably shouldn't have necessarily placed this here, because before we figure out which one of these lines does what, we need to figure out what's the best way of creating all of our new ores. So that just might have to move. The new ores are titanium, cobalt, uranium, gold, and that's it. So we have our 4. As far as titanium, it can be made from 2 sources, crazier or sapphirite. And instead of figuring out which one's better, it might make sense to just do the sapphirite and the crazier side by side and just have the titanium go straight up. Since those are the only 2 methods that create it, we don't need to worry about which one's actually better. They can just both go straight up and we'll figure out the logic later. So I kind of want to... Let's use some constant combinators to try to record some of this. I guess I'll just place it here for now. That, let's say to make... Well, that's the recipe. Not that it really matters, but let's grab the actual titanium ore. That to make titanium ore, it's either the sapphirite or the crazier. And also an advantage of those 2 sorting types is it creates no other new resources. So this can be the first thing in the line. So then cobalt is made from givelite and ferrous dust. Between the 2, you have to spend 8 givelite crystals to get 1 cobalt. And you also have to spend 8 ferrous dust to get 1 cobalt. But when you look at what you get as a byproduct, it kind of changes my mind. Like, both of them create a lot of iron, but givelite creates copper, aluminum, and zinc, where ferrous, almost everything is iron and manganese, which can be turned back into iron. The only extra thing is nickel. So I would say that the ferrous dust is better. But, kind of like before, these are the only new resources out of these 2 sorting setups, so it actually kind of makes a lot of sense to have these be right next to each other and not even really worried about which one's actually better, just send the cobalt up and then let the logic take care of it. So we can do another one. Let's like just put it right here and say we want to make the cobalt. We'll do ferrous dust and the givelite crystals. So now we've got 2 of the setups figured out. Now we have uranium and gold. Gold actually has 3 different sources, and uranium's kind of the leftover thing that, as useful as it is, we're going to be producing very little of it in the beginning here, because the only thing that's going to make it is stereotype crystal sorting. And it's probably not the best way of making any of these resources, so it's going to be a slow process. So it looks like for now we're not going to have a nuclear-powered factory, but rather we're just going to have a little bit of uranium left over to use on stuff every once in a while. We'll still have it, just not very much. Alright, well, we'll have 3 gold methods, so we need to figure out which 2 are the best ones. Well, rubite would create a lot of lead and nickel, which are kind of low priority things. Silicon and aluminum are higher, but that's a lot of byproducts for just 1 gold. The bombonium would create some tin, which is a moderate requirement. And then some other stuff. But things like silver, silicon, zinc, those are all rather useful compared to rubite. So I would say it is better to do it with bobmonium. But I would say the best is with the cupric dust, just because it creates lots of copper, which is always good, and it has no slag as a byproduct. And basically everything that you get out of cupric dust is good. Like tin is good, silver is good, gold's good. So I would say the cupric dust is best, and then bobmonium would be second best. So let's put another one in here. That for gold. Cupric dust is best, and then the bobmonium crystals are second best. And then those would go straight up into their warehouse, and they produce no other random resources. And then the last one would be where the uranium warehouse would be. So we'll mark it, except we don't want the recipe, we want the actual uranium. And the uranium will only come from stereotype. And yeah, it's not a terrible way of making it, like copper, iron, silver. These are all useful things, so we might actually want to change the priority of things a little bit to make this one of the best ways of making copper. It does create some byproducts, but it does create that uranium, which is useful. But we'll have to see about that later. The other one can be rubite crystals, because this is probably going to be near the bottom, my guess is, for production methods. So stereotype, 1, and bobmonium, 1. So now we have our orientation. So shouldn't have hooked these up, I suppose, because now we are just going to unhook them. I was hoping to not copy a bunch of stuff over until we had all the ores in there already, but it looks like we're going to have to do the copying anyway. Let's see, what to actually copy? Well, over here there's very few things on the bottom to actually have to bring with us. So let's grab what we can here. It's going to be kind of awkward because they're stacked on top of each other, but maybe we should just grab everything and actually make a blueprint for it so we can fix it. Well, we don't need tiles. Probably leave the power lines in place. But remove this, and that's not even connected to the same thing, so those can be completely removed. We don't need this. Here, the sorting setup ends right there. And it technically starts right here, so we can get rid of all of these. All of this needs to stay in place. So what does that leave us with? Yeah, that's pretty good. It looks like we're still going to have to modify it, though, so maybe I even kind of selected the wrong thing here. So we'll just place it down and see what happens. Save that one for last because it's like out of the way. So we have this, and it lines up here, and then needs to line up down there as well. And looks like we've got some belts in the way we're going to have to move. So I guess might as well move it now. Oh, there's so many construction robots in there. It's like taking a while to pick them all up. There we go. Let's see, get rid of these. That is the spot. Can kind of get rid of this now. It's going to kind of break some stuff, but we need to continue the wire along. See, is that in the same spot? Seems like these are slightly misaligned. Or is that just me? Because it seems like it's like one square too low. That would be annoying. Well, let's make sure the warehouse part lines up. Yeah, it does. Oh well, we'll figure it out later. Let's see, can we just drop this in here? There we go. That's what I was wanting to see. That they do just fit on top of each other. So put that in there. And we want to do another one and another one. Well, some of this stuff certainly needs to get moved. Like this guy. Let's just pick it up for now and put it somewhere else where we don't have to think about it. Well, we need to completely change this then. And now we know exactly what we need to change to. The sapphirite and crotinium sorting. So, We'll pick up what we removed, drop it right back in, and also unhook all this stuff. It's kind of funny how that random warehouse in the middle of nowhere is getting all these ores. But I suppose when we move it, it will get fixed. Okay, those are set up for now. It's nice having the robot zone everywhere so the robots can help out, and we don't need that one anymore. But let's get the saffrite. This is the only place that they go, so there doesn't need to be any splitters. Next one is ferrous dust and givelite crystals. So I think with the dust here, we removed 3 of the machines. So there's the dust. There's the givelite. So this makes this even more asymmetrical here. Take the dust a little further then. That power pole is kind of in the way, but it also kind of doesn't matter because we can just jump over it since our belt reach is bigger than the bus. I don't think you can quite reach that whole distance, but you get most of it. So there it goes. Then the next one is cupric dust and bobmonium. So if we're doing more dust, we don't need any of these. Let's zip cupric along. And the bobmonium, which is all the way down here. And there it goes. And the last 2, stereotyte and bobmonium, but it looks like they're both bobmonium, so I must have got one of those kind of mixed up. I think it was supposed to be rubite because we were dealing with gold, so it was rubite and then stereotyte because that's the only way to make uranium. So we switch this to the rubite and the stereotyte. Okay, the rubite is ending there for some reason, so we'll have to figure out why it's not going through. And running out of belts, as is always the case when doing stuff like this. Alright, what happened to that rubite? Just another belt that's not pointed the right way? There we go. Okay, well that's all of the resources, making it to the end of the bus where they're needed. So we can kind of wait for robots to deliver everything we're waiting on here. But for now, let's try this again. Attempt number 2, just to see how these sorting methods work and see the colorful ores. That this first setup is designed to make our titanium. And it's going to do it with sapphirite and cruthenium. And either way, it's going to make it in very small quantities. Which is what we're going to have to deal with for now. And there it is. I see that sweet, sweet titanium purple on the belts there. Looking good. I've noticed that the volume of these machines is really quiet. I think that with the recent Angels updates that they changed the volume of the machines and it's like layered upon my own changes of the volumes to make it more YouTube friendly, so they're super quiet, so I'll probably want to take a look at that in a bit. But here is our method of making cobalt, which is ferrous dust and givelite crystals. Looking good. I'm seeing the cobalt in there, and it's kind of funny again how it's all rather well sorted in the beginning. And now we have our methods of making gold. There's one more method back here, but these methods are for gold, so with cupric powder and the bobmonium crystals. And of course there's also slag built in there as well, because most of these methods produce some slag. And finally, the other method of making gold, the rubite, but also our tiny bit of uranium. One thing to consider about uranium production right now is because we're going to make so little of it, I'm thinking that I want to treat uranium as a byproduct, not as something we produce, because anything that's a fuel in Factorio, you use a ton of. So if we're using uranium for fuel, we're going to be producing copper, iron, silver, and tin constantly, especially copper. And if we don't need it, we don't need it. So we're just going to jam our ore bus full of resources just trying to hopelessly create a little bit of uranium. So I'm thinking for now that we're not actually going to produce uranium in any significant amounts. If it's a byproduct, fine. We'll process it in a fuel and burn it. But I don't think it's necessarily worth attempting to make it in large quantities right now. But that's looking pretty good. So now we have our outputs up here. You probably don't need these little commentators as little hints of what we were wanting to do. So we can grab those. And I'll take this as an opportunity to change some of the volume of the machines. So I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. I reverted all of the volume changes that I did to mostly Angel's machines, just to make it a little more YouTube friendly, because if you've been with the series since the beginning, you'll remember that some of those machines were very loud back then. And you can change the volume of all of the machines in the game, but it's difficult to change the volume of one type of machine compared to others. I know a lot of people who do like YouTube videos like to just kind of make the game volume really low. I kind of prefer to hear some of it, just have it a little quieter. So I don't like the idea of essentially making it almost silent just because there's some noisy machines. So if you've ever downloaded the save file that I put in the description, basically just to let you sync mods, that there's one that you might have seen called Marsh Tune. All that is basically me changing the volume of these machines so it can be easier to listen to. And it's kind of monotonous because you have to change each one individually as far as I can tell. So I had quite a few changes for basically everything, like ore crushers, ore sorters, and things like that. And because so much was changed, I just decided to revert everything. So please pardon my dust for a little while. It looks like we ran out of power. That I might find out which ones weren't changed by which machines are still obnoxiously loud. So right now it's back to original machine volume levels, as if I did nothing to them. So we will see how it works. And I'll just make a note of anything that's loud and kind of go back in there and fix it. So if you didn't know, you can also hover over the induction station and you see that there's an energy charge right there, 100 joules. It's not actually storing energy. All it's doing is telling you how charged your batteries are when you're standing there. So it's actually kind of cool. So you don't have to like open up your armor or hover over things. You can just kind of look at that bar, or you can look at this charge bar right here, but it's a little less precise than just looking on the side there. But let's trash our inventory a little bit and pick up some resources and see how loud these machines get. It's actually not that bad. They seem tolerable now, so I'm not complaining. There's kind of no point in making changes to mods if everything is good, so I won't do any volume changes unless things seem loud again. One other thing that's worth noting is that, at least at the time of this recording, that there was an update to Angels. It's kind of like a partial update. It doesn't completely fix everything, but it actually changed quite a bit of the problems that the update originally had, which is kind of funny. It's also kind of a problem of doing a YouTube series, is you want the series to continue, so you keep playing. But then after you do a bunch of work, you find out that, oh, things are different now. So for one, they fixed the recipes that were broken right here, and they're not there anymore. But we can come back in if we can remember what it is. So this was nitroglycerin. So if we come back in here, the recipe has returned. So we can put those back in. And also, our fertilizer recipe has returned as well. Let's get the right one, which I believe is this. Well, if it's running, it probably is. And we were running pretty low. Those actually aren't that loud either. So it's kind of nice that a lot of those things got changed. Another interesting change that's worth mentioning is that the crystallizers kind of got reverted. So if you remember, we kind of had to go around the factory basically changing every single crystallizer to be crystallizer 2. in order to make various things like crystal catalyst, for example, because they increased the minimum crystallizer from 1 to 2. Well, that was reverted. So now you could do them with crystallizer 1 again. So all of that work was entirely unnecessary. At least if I waited, it would have been unnecessary. You wouldn't have gotten any Factorio episodes for a while from me if I just decided to wait. But unfortunately, when it comes to mods, you have no idea if they're ever going to get fixed or not. So you kind of just have to go with it. So that's kind of frustrating in a sense, where those updates were done and then they were just reverted. So was it half thought out? Like, why go through that effort and then make people who are playing Factorio change their factories for your new update and then just revert them after the fact anyway? It just seems kind of, I don't know, thoughtless in a way. I don't know, maybe there was a reason for it, but from my perspective, I'm like, how many hours did I spend running around the factory fixing problems? And then like half of them have been reverted now with the new update. Just seems a little frustrating. But I do very much appreciate the volumes seeming to be fixed, because a lot of these machines were like obnoxiously loud before. So it's nice that those are much more friendly to YouTube ears. Okay, we've got our new lines here. We have supplied the ores in, and there doesn't need to be any input control circuits, but there does need to be output control circuits. Not to mention, we actually need to get these things sorted properly. So for now, I think I'll just remove all of these. And we need to get these set up for the resources they're designed for. So we will create a test signal. Probably turn them all on. We'll see what's going on there. Ah, it's because they're adding the numbers together. Because each one of these is adding 30,000 of the aluminum ore. So that'll stop in a second. We need to set these to titanium. So this one is now going to be titanium. And we have to go through each one of these. Hopefully it doesn't mess it up by going through each one sequentially. And let's just try to get all these beeping stopped. So this one is going to be the cobalt. Or if turning these on and off will help. Kind of. The number's going down. Then this one is going to be the gold, which looks similar, but it's not the same as the aluminum. And there we go. And this last one is the uranium. So now when we come here, we should have our 4 new ores, and we have our 30,000 test signal for now, which is good. We do need to kind of fix some of these warnings. It's actually interesting that I guess we're not making speakers. So as a result, none of these requests have been filled, which I guess makes sense. Are there any in the crawler? Doesn't look like it, so we need a couple new ones. Put that in there. We do need to change it now to the correct resource types. Also, this warning light needs to be switched as well. I don't know if there would have been a better way to do this with the circuit network, but it's a relatively minor annoyance to get all these set up. And also, yeah, these Nixie tubes as well also need to be directly configured to their resource type so they will show up properly. Okay, now we have the storage area. Let's get these sorters figured out, so any ore that comes from downstream will get sent where it needs to go. This one is cobalt, and luckily they're all the exact same orientation. Gold, and the uranium. So now we need to get these resources onto the bus potentially. This is just the setup that if it's a direct insertion into the warehouse and nothing goes on the bus, but we are sending stuff on the bus, so we need to kind of copy how it was done elsewhere. Something where it both goes into the warehouse and skips past it. But I guess it doesn't matter, because skipping past it just goes straight under anyway. So all we need to do is grab one of these sorting setups, take it between these two areas. So something like this. So if we drop this in here, it should convert this to pulling it off. And it looks like it does, it's just there's a lot of stuff that needs to be changed. Kind of to an annoying extent. It might be easier just to pick the entire thing up. And drop it in there. And let robots kind of take forever getting here. Doing it in this way, though, doesn't really have a straight-through thing, but we can kind of configure that. But I kind of want to start on getting all these fixed up first, because the robots need to come down here and help out, so let's get all these updated first. And they're gonna wait a little while. Well, maybe not that long. Factory robots were nearby. Okay. But we will have to wait for them to be placed before we can get the sorting figured out. But between the two of these, how much titanium are we actually going to be making? 7.8. Not much for 2 entire lines. What this means is they can kind of combine here, where those can go on the bus as normal to get placed properly. Well, these ones will get rid of the titanium. We'll do the same here, but switch the sides. There we go. So both of these will attempt to grab titanium and put them in the middle, and then eject them straight forward. And that will hop over the whole thing. And it looks like some of our things got in here, so we can also set these up. Actually, they would be exactly that. Although they don't look quite the same. So let's see, it would be kind of like this. Oh, this is looking fairly good. Fairly familiar. It's annoying, but I think we have to pick all this stuff up and copy it again, because every setup back here is going to look exactly the same. But the other thing we need to do is rip out the slag from the setup. It's basically going to look something like this. So let's try to add this in as well. So it would be right here, but because of positioning, it's a little weird. So let's just pull out the belts related to the slag for now. And actually, they're going to kind of go the opposite direction, which is going to make this even more interesting. Because the slag is going between these setups, not on the end here. So they're going to switch directions. So we're going to have a slag warehouse right here. Let's line it up. Slag goes in, and it goes out. It's going to be 3 belts. And it's a sorting warehouse, at least for now. So we'll just have the 1 square. And it looks like they line up so far. So we're going to need to pull the slag off, and I'm going to have to pull it off of both sides. Maybe something like this, because it allows the slag to go both directions. There we go, and it gets pulled off. Set these to slag, both on the right, so now we'll have some amount of slag. It's not going to be much, but we can check all of this to see. It's a 7.8. Then we're going to have it enter the sorting warehouse, and we're going to need these here as well. We're going to want another one in there, although it needs to be 1 more space back because of resources coming from further down. Need to be able to jump over. And it would be something like that. Okay, that's a lot more to copy now. But let's see if we can pull up enough stuff to where it will work. So we want to pull these up. And honestly, probably just yank everything out again. Up to, like, right here. Then we can, like, pull out the sorting stuff and maybe grab this first. There we go, that much lines up. Then grab this much next, and it would line up right here. Okay, that seems pretty good. So let's make the robots work for their pay again by ripping all this out. And kind of plopping it all in. So at the beginning, we only need the one with no sorting warehouse. But let's just move it up and over. Then we have a sorting warehouse turning it into 2, and I'm not too worried about these belts or anything. That's why I'm just like, well, 1 goes into 2, goes into 3, just to keep it easy. So those 2 go in there, they jump across, and then it becomes 3, and we'll let it stay as 3. Then we got to change all of these filters yet again. Kind of a lot of work that goes into this, but then it's kind of glorious to see it in action, so it makes it all worth it in the end. Okay, we've got some belts coming through. You can hook up all of these, and now that we're thinking about it at the end, we do need to get the ore repository put on the back, and we kind of need to adjust this as well to make this look a little better. We're gonna lose a charge pad, but that's how it is. You place them and then you pick them up. Let's pick all this up for now. Then copy how it was done over here, and hopefully it'll just fit right there. Okay. Then we're going to completely use up all of our belts. Well, I was hoping the base bots would help if I used ghosts, but it's just using the personal bots. Oh well. Gotta get all these connected. It looks like some factory bots are helping. So that much is back. Okay, the robots came in here. Get these set up. And then at the very end, we're going to need to inject some resources. And what's interesting is that those resources are actually going to come from this belt here. But it makes more sense for them to be on the end. So we might have to kind of co-opt a line on the bus here for this. Well, that's why we have all these lines in the bus, is specifically so we can do that. I think we have 2 whole extra groups of 6 for this. So it's not the end of the world to have to do that. But there we go. Now we have the 1 into 2 into 4 into 8. Just scatter it along the bus. And we have 2 lines we can use for this. One of them being this warehouse. But we could probably place it there. If this is all in place, it should go down fine. It's just there won't be any of these new ores, but they should go down the process without having any issues. So if we grab this thing and kind of just place it somewhere, although we are running out of squares on here to insert resources. So in that sense, maybe it should be a big one. And this belt will have to move when these machines get moved, but that's okay. It looks like the silicon can kind of skip the bus just fine. And then our crystallizer ores can come through here and just get sorted appropriately. That's 1 less belt that comes through here. And now that we kind of know where stuff is, we can put this in here. Will it reach? Aww. We can get the silicon hooked back up. Let it go where it needs to go. So a lot of these should be set now. Doesn't really matter which one is where. Just as long as they're somewhere. So you can grab various ones. Put them in there. So these should all be set up already. So if we tell robots to pick all these up, they should then get moved over here. And they are. Look at that. We'll get the other ore types set up after we're actually got everything else done. But they're being sent along. None of them are going into the wrong warehouses. So that's looking great. Now I think we just need to worry about the logic here. And previously, it was set up to where there was a set of on and off signals for each resource. So since there were 4 potential ores that could come out of any of these outputs, at least at a maximum, there's 4 potential on signals and 4 potential off signals for each of those resources. And there's 16 because one of these groups connects to the left side and one of them connects to the right. And then we had a set of lights here to show basically how many on signals and how many off signals. And when there's no lights, it means there's no on signals and no offs, basically just to help us diagnose if necessary. So since there's no lights, it means nothing is being requested or denied. And is that going to change with this new sorting type? Kind of. Because now, instead of having 4 potential ores, we now have 5 that we need to go through, at least at a maximum. And luckily, things will fit. Unfortunately, this power pole is going to have to be moved. And it is moving the wire down, so that's a little annoying. But we could copy this over, and it would work in largely the same way. So let's get it done for one of them, and then we can copy it over. So it would be something like this. And let's see, does it fit in the same spot? It seems to. That always feels good. So we'll go in there. And the numbers are the same. I don't know if the crawler has any extra combinators we might need. I don't know if we'll need the arithmetic ones. We'll just grab them. So for this to work, we're going to have to pick it up and put it back down 1 square over. Same wire going across, but now we have a group of 2 more machines. We've got to carefully follow the wires. So then there they go. They both have their inputs. And then their outputs is either the green or the red wires. It looks like there's an unnecessary red wire on this side. Doesn't seem like it should be there. Although we need an extra space also for the red signal as well, so we are going to have to move this over further, and based on these setups, the pole can only go 1 more square over and then there won't be any room. So that is potentially a problem to worry about. At least for things to be perfectly symmetrical. So let's move these over. Put these here and then very carefully make sure all of these wires properly jump the gaps. So I don't think we need that one. Okay. So that's good. We'll get it all configured later, but we also need all these lights. I don't need them, I guess, but they're nice. These will be easier to configure. Just drag them over. Oh, because of that warehouse, they don't fit. Oh, well, we can move them down 1, I guess, to get our last little space. There we go. So the wires are connected, but we need to make sure everything's good. Then what this is doing is grabbing from over here, and the wire is not connected. So you want to make sure that it is. So connect the green, connect the red, and don't worry about these lights for now. It's just kind of junk information. But one of the green wires goes to here on the right, and then the red wire goes to the left. And all this is doing is taking the signal and multiplying it by 1 to create the signal. But the reason why it's doing that is because there's 2 wires, a red and a green wire, and each wire could have either red or green squares on them. So to make these lights the correct color and the numbers, it's separating the green from the red. Then you have to have like 1 or more of greens to get a 1, 2 or more, 3, and then it'll be 4 and 5, but we have to make sure that these numbers make sense. So more than 3, more than 4, and then 5. So we're getting green signals because nothing's hooked up. So basically the number is 0, so it's saying, turn them all on, we're out of everything. And that's kind of what's going on there. So if we hook this up to the inputs of each side, now all the lights are off because the signals have come through and they have shut off. And then these right here are the start and stop signals. First is the stop belt, where if any of these are red, so any of the 5 ores is overloaded, and it sends 1 red signal out of a potential of 5, it shuts the whole thing down. And there's no red signal, so it's going. And then the other one back here needs to have at least 1 green signal to turn it on. So this will only be on if there's no red signals, while this one will be on as long as there's at least 1 green signal. And that's essentially how all of them work. Now that we have the logic, we can copy it over. We'll still need to configure it all, but that's entirely separate process. Right now we just want to make sure all of the combinators are ready and the wires are in the right place, which they seem to be. So when we copy this stuff over and get rid of those, because they're going to be in slightly the wrong spot, hopefully this stuff barely lines up. And sadness, it isn't. So it would if these were down and to the left. Kind of don't like them being so smushed. So I wonder if putting them like right here would be better. So it would be kind of like that. Then we still need to connect the wire. Something a little more out of the way. So let's try this. There we go. Now we got something we can copy. This is easier than the first time now that we have bots to do all this for us. Okay, and as usual, we have to make sure there's no funny business going on with these wires, and they're all overlapping on each other, so it's super hard to tell. But it looks like it's the same problem as before, where there's that one errant red connector that doesn't need to go through here. Definitely there's some art when it comes to placing circuit networks down where the wires actually look pleasing to the eye and they make sense, rather than just kind of being layered on here and having a bunch of wires and you have to carefully squint at them to see which one is which. And I think with that, it's ready to be configured. But that's a pretty detailed process, so that's going to wait for the next episode. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.